not squander them. It was therefore encouraging that on 9 March, President Aoun affirmed Lebanon's readiness to engage in direct negotiations with Israel under international auspices, with the aim of achieving a complete truce. He also proposed that the Lebanese armed forces, upon receiving urgent logistical support, would immediately take control of areas of tensions, confiscating all weapons and dismantling Hezbollah infrastructure. Prime Minister Salam has likewise reiterated Lebanon's commitment to achieving a state monopoly on arms. On 2 March, in condemning Hezbollah's actions, he affirmed the government's complete rejection of any military activity outside the scope of legitimate state institutions and reaffirmed the state's full authority over war and peace decisions. In a landmark statement, he announced the cabinet's decision prohibiting Hezbollah's military and security activities and mandating the immediate handover of weapons, tasking the Lebanese state security forces with the enforcement of this decision. These declarations have been accompanied by concrete measures. The Lebanese army has reported the detention of approximately 26 Lebanese nationals, including Hezbollah members, and 1 Palestinian, all for the illegal possession of weapons and ammunition. Judicial rulings have been passed down against some of the Hezbollah members arrested. Separately, on 5 March, the Lebanese government declared a ban on the activities of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Lebanon and revoked visa-free entry for Iranian citizens. Mr. President, while more hard work will prove critical, such statements and actions are significant. They reflect a clear resolve of the Lebanese state, and they warrant the full support of this Council. The United Nations remains firmly committed to assisting all parties in meeting their responsibilities. To enable Lebanon to fulfill its obligations under Resolutions 1559 and 1701, an immediate de-escalation and cessation of violence is imperative. Hezbollah must cease its attacks on Israel and cooperate with the government's efforts to assert full state authority and establish a monopoly over weapons. Israel must halt its military campaign in Lebanon and withdraw its forces from Lebanese territory. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of both Lebanon and Israel must be upheld. All parties must respect their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law. Civilians and civilian infrastructure must never be targeted. United Nations personnel must be protected. And the international community must scale up its support to the Lebanese state security services, particularly the Lebanese armed forces, to ensure they have the capacity and resources they critically require. The Secretary General continues to engage with member states to press for an end to this conflict. The Special Coordinator for Lebanon has been in contact with all relevant actors, including through a visit to Israel earlier this week, to advocate urgently for de-escalation and dialogue. As Undersecretary General Lacroix will report, UNIFIL peacekeepers remain in position along the Blue Line, often at great risk. To prevent further loss of life and to create the space for meaningful political engagement, violence must stop. Only then can the parties resume the difficult but indispensable work of building a stable and secure future for both Lebanon and Israel. We will continue to work closely with all concerned to restore calm and protect civilians. Our objective is straightforward: a return to a situation in which commitments under Resolutions 1559 and 1701 can be pursued in a credible and sustainable manner. This is a moment that requires restraint, responsibility, and a willingness to prioritize the well-being of the populations who bear the brunt of these hostilities. The United Nations stands ready to assist but the decisions that shape the coming days must be guided by a collective recognition that further escalation benefits no one. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members of the Security Council. As you just heard from Under Secretary General DiCarlo, the fragile situation that prevails since November 2024 has given way to a significant and dangerous escalation of hostilities. We are gravely concerned that there will be a further worsening of the situation in Lebanon and in the region. In this dangerous and precarious environment, UNIFIL remains on the ground, implementing its mandate as far as the security circumstances allow. Since the 2nd of March, when Hezbollah claimed responsibility for an attack on Israel, the group has carried out daily strikes across the Blue Line, including with rockets, missiles, and drones at targets in Israel and the occupied Syrian Golan. Many rockets have been launched from south of the Litani River, which demonstrates the presence of unauthorized armed personnel, assets, and weapons south of the Litani River, in clear violation of Resolution 1701. The Israel Defense Forces have issued displacement orders for the entire UNIFIL area of operations and intensified daily strikes, impacting multiple locations in the UNIFIL area of operations, also in violation of Resolution 1701. Since the 1st of March, UNIFIL has reported some 4,120 trajectories, including 2,733 from south to north of the Blue Line and 323 air attacks by the Israel Defense Forces. In the same period, UNIFIL has recorded 1,387 trajectories from north to south. Notably, each trajectory may represent multiple projectiles, and UNIFIL cannot detect some projectiles, such as those fired by portable anti-tank launchers or light weapons. On the 9th of March alone, UNIFIL recorded 159 air violations, the highest number observed in a 24-hour period since the resumption of hostilities. The Israel Defense Forces have also reinforced the 5 positions at which they have maintained a presence north of the Blue Line. UNIFIL has observed incursion by the Israeli Defense Forces units into Lebanon at several locations, including through Yaroun in Sector West and Hula, Khiam, and Markaba in Sector East. On the 9th of March, one Israel Defense Forces tank was observed near Kunin in southeast Lebanon, 7 kilometers north of the Blue Line. Direct clashes between Hezbollah and Israeli Defense Forces inside Lebanon have been reported, including in Hula and Khiam on the 4th of March. Extensive buildup of Israeli military assets south of the Blue Line also continues to be reported. There have been several incidents that have jeopardized the safety and security of our peacekeepers. On the 6th of March, peacekeepers from the Ghanaian contingent were severely injured inside their base in Al-Kawza, Sector West. He is currently being treated at a hospital in Beirut and is now in a serious but stable condition. Several other peacekeepers were injured less seriously, while the base was heavily damaged in the resulting fires. We obviously wish a speedy recovery to all involved. A UNIFIL investigation is ongoing, including to determine the origin of the projectiles or munitions that impact the UN position. On the 7th of March, an Israel Defense Forces tank stopped in front of a UNIFIL observation post near Markaba in Sector East. Subsequently, the peacekeepers heard multiple rounds of small arms fire, and 2 of the post's perimeter lights were damaged. On the 8th of March, 2 loud explosions were heard near a UNIFIL headquarters in Nakura. Debris consistent with a drone or a rocket, as well as remnants of an Iron Dome interception, fell inside the UNIFIL camp. No injuries were reported. Mr. President, our peacekeepers have remained in position in line with the mandate this Council has provided, while continuously reassessing the force's posture against prevailing risks. UNIFIL continues to maintain constant contact with the parties to avoid misunderstandings, deconflict, and de-escalate where possible. All parties bear a clear and unequivocal responsibility to ensure the safety and security of UN peacekeepers. We call on all actors on the ground to uphold this obligation and to refrain from any action that endangers UNIFIL peacekeepers. With the ongoing exchanges of fire severely restricting their movements, UNIFIL's current focus includes ensuring safety of its personnel and helping facilitate humanitarian access to affected communities in the area. UNIFIL has supported the local community in line with its protection of civilians mandate, transporting dozens of civilians to safety from several villages in southern Lebanon, including children, older persons, and persons with disabilities, in close coordination with local authorities. On the 7th of March, UNIFIL assisted in evacuating 3 families from Sarda in Sector East. On the 10th of March, at the request of the municipality of Alma al-Shab in Sector West, UNIFIL facilitated the safe movement of around 80 civilians who wished to leave the area. Peacekeepers have largely been confined to their bases, with some spending significant periods of time in shelter, which seriously impedes UNIFIL's freedom of movement and limits the mission's monitoring and reporting ability. Troop rotations are currently suspended. This security environment has also presented challenges for the resupply of fuel, food, and water for UN positions. Roadblocks erected by the Israel Defense Forces have restricted access to a number of our positions. The UNIFIL head of mission and force commander, General Abanyara, is coordinating closely with the Special Coordinator for Lebanon, who is the designated official for security for all United Nations personnel in Lebanon. Program Essential UNIFIL civilian personnel have been moved to reside in UNIFIL headquarters at Nakura. Other international civilian personnel are relocating out of the South Litani sector, in some cases out of Lebanon. The mission is assisting our national colleagues who wish to relocate to the North Litani sector. Mr. President, the Lebanese armed forces had made significant efforts since the cessation of hostilities in November 2024, steadily reinforcing their presence in the south and progressively extending their deployment along the Blue Line. We commend these efforts, which represented an important step towards the full implementation of Resolution 1701. However, in the face of the current hostilities, the Lebanese armed forces have had to temporarily relocate some 20 kilometers north of the Blue Line. Mr. President, as noted by Undersecretary General Di Carlo, and as you will hear in more detail from Undersecretary General Tom Fletcher, the heavy exchanges of fire have most tragically had the greatest impact on civilians on both sides of the Blue Line, with many casualties and hundreds of thousands displaced in Lebanon. In southern Lebanon, the humanitarian situation continues to worsen, with IDP shelters reporting near full occupancy and lacking means to meet basic needs. UNIFIL's liaison and coordination team has continued its close engagement with the Lebanese armed forces and Israel Defense Forces, seeking to de-escalate and facilitate humanitarian missions. In the past week, UNIFIL has facilitated dozens of missions by the Lebanese Red Cross. In the interest of the safety of both peacekeepers and civilians, we urge the parties to commit to active deconfliction through this channel. To those member states contributing troops to UNIFIL, we extend our most sincere gratitude. The continued united commitment of the troop contributing countries, as well as the support of this council, is crucial. I express solidarity with and pride in the men and women of UNIFIL, again on the front lines. Only a political solution will bring lasting stability to Lebanon and the region. We urge all parties to recommit to the full implementation of Resolution 1701 and to engage constructively toward that end. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Lacroix for his briefing, and I now give the floor to Mr. Tom Fletcher.
Mr. President, Ambassador Bartos, Excellencies, this is a moment of grave peril for Lebanon and for the region, for all of us. Too many warning lights are flashing. Actions have consequences. Lebanon's particular place on the map and in history means that tremors in geopolitics ricochet through it like earthquakes. So when the world turns away from international law and human solidarity, Lebanon shakes. When the world pulls apart, when the splintering of the international order is cheered on by those who believe the rules do not apply to them, or that they can take risks with the lives of others, when leaders feel unrestrained and the rules are in retreat, when the gains of decades are precarious, when technology and killing form an increasingly deadly alliance, and when the scaffolding for coexistence is under sustained, deliberate attack, then Lebanon shakes. As a result of the region's latest war, and following months of violence, we've watched the humanitarian crisis in Lebanon intensify with alarming speed, with civilians on both sides of the blue line once again paying the heaviest price. Casualties continue to mount. Over 570 people reported killed, over 1,400 injured since the 2nd of March. Mass displacement is accelerating, with over 750,000 people now registered with the government of Lebanon as on the move. In addition, almost 84,000 Syrians and more than 8,000 Lebanese have crossed into Syria since the 2nd of March. We're seeing large-scale movements into densely populated urban areas where shelter capacity is already overstretched. More than 120,000 people, including thousands of children, are now in 580 collective centers. And as you heard earlier, these sites are overcrowded, with inadequate sanitation, insufficient essential supplies. These conditions heighten risks of harassment, sexual violence, exploitation, abuse, trafficking, particularly, of course, for women and girls. The people of Lebanon have, of course, already endured extensive displacement and damage to homes and livelihoods, infrastructure, and essential public services during the 2023 to 24 escalation, compounding the impact of the financial and economic collapse experienced since 2019. At the same time, the escalation is pushing an already fragile education system deeper into crisis. Schools have been forced to close to serve as temporary shelters, disrupting learning for tens of thousands of children. Overcrowded shelters are also raising the risk of disease, while psychosocial trauma, an acute aspect of this crisis since the 2024 escalation, is being compounded. As these health needs rise, hostilities have forced the closure of 49 primary healthcare centers and 5 hospitals in the south and in Beirut's southern suburbs. Since 28th of February, the World Health Organization has recorded 25 attacks on healthcare, resulting in 16 deaths and 29 injuries among health workers and patients. The protection of healthcare is paramount. Mr. President, the United Nations and the broader humanitarian community are fully mobilized to complement government-led efforts. Along with local organizations and women-led groups, we will do all we can to reach those most in need. We and our partners have provided over 500,000 hot meals, distributed over 270,000 liters of bottled water, provided hygiene items and household supplies, and 123,000 liters of fuel to sustain critical services. Our rapid response teams are delivering life-saving supplies in shelters. 125 health sector-supported mobile primary healthcare units are providing services too. Child protection, psychosocial support are also being expanded, alongside preparations for emergency cash assistance for vulnerable children and families. In close coordination with the government of Lebanon, a 3-month hyper-prioritized flash appeal will be launched in Beirut later this week. This emergency scale-up comes on top of existing humanitarian programs under the 2026 Lebanon Response Plan. I will support these efforts with a rapid response allocation of $15 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to help scale up life-saving work. Additional funds will be released through a reserve allocation from the Lebanon Humanitarian Fund. But our ability to reach people is tightening by the day. Large areas of South Lebanon, the Bekaa, and Beirut's southern suburbs remain active conflict zones. Debris and unexploded ordnance are blocking roads to affected villages, and key transport routes, including those linking the Bekaa, have been repeatedly disrupted. Population movements are shifting quickly and increasingly difficult to track. Of course, Lebanon's latest humanitarian crisis is just one more consequence of a regional war that is spiraling out of control. War does not stay neatly within borders. It tears through markets, supply chains, food prices. And when that happens, the most vulnerable people in Lebanon and across the region are hit first and hardest. When maritime corridors such as the Strait of Hormuz are disrupted, food, health, energy become more expensive and harder to access. Impact on food security is already evident in Gaza, where the price of flour is up by 270%. Global shipping costs have increased 16% compared to this time last year. We anticipate delays of 6 months in the delivery of supplies across multiple humanitarian responses. Airspace closures are also disrupting our humanitarian missions across the region. So we are pre-positioning stocks, activating alternative supply routes to keep life-saving aid moving to Lebanon and, of course, across the region. But as the Secretary General insisted and USG DiCarlo underlined, we need the protection of civilians, de-escalation, an immediate cessation of hostilities, and genuine dialogue and negotiations towards a peaceful settlement, in line with the Charter of the United Nations. As ever, I close with 3 asks of the Security Council. First, civilians, all civilians throughout the region must be protected and their access to life-saving help ensured. Constant care must be taken to spare civilians and civilian infrastructure, hospitals, water sources, schools, energy, at all times and by all parties. Humanitarians and humanitarian premises must be protected and our movements to provide aid facilitated. Today has been another tragic day for our humanitarian family. We're seeing civilians, including humanitarian workers, under attack across the region, in Lebanon, the occupied Palestinian territory, in Israel, in Iran, in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, in United Arab Emirates, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan, Syria, Oman, and beyond. Second, we need generous funding for a principled, scaled-up humanitarian response. We must be supported to go wherever the needs are in the region. I have reaffirmed our readiness to help civilians in Lebanon, Iran, the occupied Palestinian territory, in Israel, or any other countries as needed. Humanitarian action is always harder in times of war, but this is, of course, when it is most needed. So we count on member states to help ensure that this life-saving work continues in the Middle East and beyond across the global humanitarian crisis. And yet we're seeing staggering amounts of money, reportedly $1 billion a day spent on destruction, while some politicians boast of cutting aid to those in gravest danger globally. With a fraction of this money, we can save millions of lives globally. Thirdly, and finally, we need a revival of strategic, calm, rational, hopeful diplomacy. We need calmer heads to prevail. Peacemaking is hard, but it is always better, and it takes more courage than the alternative. Every time you hear the powerful attack the UN, ask yourself what they gained by weakening us. And yet, we're seeing a sustained attack against the systems meant to restrain states from reckless warfare, a pattern of attrition against international law and humanitarian principles. Politicians flexing their muscles by sending others to die. As conflicts spread, the international system pulls further apart and more resources flow towards weapons, not saving lives. So a simple test for your actions. If your opponent were doing this to you, what would you say? Let's have the courage to recommit instead to lasting peace, sustained stability, dependable governance, and international law. Mr. President, Excellencies, Lebanon is exhausted by other people's wars. It is not asking for help, but for oxygen. Its people can defy the history, the geography, even the politics. They can be stronger than the forces pulling them apart. But they can only do that if Iran and Israel stop fighting their wars in Lebanon. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Fletcher for his briefing, and I now give the floor to Ms. Lynn Harfouche.
Mr. President, members of the Security Council, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. My name is Lynn Harfouche. I am a Lebanese political activist from the city of Baalbek. I grew up in the Bekaa and spent much of my life in Beirut's southern suburbs. Today, like many families, mine too is displaced. In the early hours of last Monday morning, while Lebanese families slept in their homes, Hezbollah once again dragged our country into a war the Lebanese people did not choose. This decision was not taken by the state. It was imposed by a militia that answers to interests beyond the Lebanese borders. For many Lebanese, this is a tragic cycle we know too well. I am 34 years old and I've known nothing but Hezbollah's hegemony in my community. I myself grew up supporting them. In 2006, they entered a war by kidnapping Israeli soldiers at the borders. My neighborhood got razed by Israeli bombs. I was 14 then and saw Hezbollah as our protectors, even as I was displayed on a traumatizing night. But coming back to our neighborhood, I found our livelihood destroyed, suffocated by yellow flags claiming a divine victory, seeing them celebrate over our collective ruin while their grip on our streets only tightened. I felt they were occupying our wreckage to secure their own dominance. The mask fell and I saw the truth. The truth that resistance was a mere facade to exploit an entire country for an expansionist project. The truth that Hezbollah seeks to break us away from other communities through its ideological and social project. The truth that under Hezbollah's dominance, Iran's arm in Lebanon, war becomes a recurring reality, fear our constant companion, and our lives a mere expendable for the sake of the supreme leader. The terrible part in all of this is the very same scenario played again in 2023, when Hezbollah decided to open what they called the support front against Israel right after October 7th. And again in 2026, after they had promised the Lebanese government they would not commit suicide once more. And Israel's military response to Hezbollah, on the other hand, has resulted in mass displacement and destruction. Hundreds of Lebanese have been killed in the past week. As I speak, thousands of Israeli soldiers are massed at our southern border, and we Lebanese fear that the conflict can only widen further. We are trapped in this unending war of access. Who pays the price? Not the men who deliver speeches about resistance from protected bunkers, but the mother carrying 2 sleeping children down the stairs at 1 a.m, but the elderly in Baalbek, the families in Nabatiyeh, and all the displaced now sleeping in cars, sidewalks, or in overcrowded shelters. According to latest figures, the number of internally displaced people has reached almost 1 million, including nearly 200,000 now living in collective shelters across hundreds of sites. For a country already battered by economic collapse, this is a disaster, one that needs to be addressed urgently by helping the Lebanese government. Yet, the answer to this humanitarian crisis cannot only be humanitarian. It needs to be political. At its core, Lebanon's crisis is one of sovereignty, accountability, and a weakened state. No society can rebuild, no economy can recover, and no youth can build a future when a country's fate is controlled by a suicidal fraction. Mr. President, members of the Security Council, I was raised in the very environment from which Hezbollah claims its legitimacy. I know its language. I know its threats. I know the fear it creates when people are told that silence is loyalty and obedience is dignity. But there is no dignity in radicalizing entire communities to serve Iran's theocratic regime through its doctrine, Wilayat al-Faqih. There is no honor in making Lebanese children pay the higher price. There is no resistance in holding an entire nation hostage. I am here to tell you that millions of Lebanese, including many Shiites, want a different future. I also speak to you today as a mother of 2 boys, Hadi, who is 11, and Rey, who is 10 years old. On the night the Israeli bombing intensified, Rey woke up trembling in the middle of the night and asked me a question that many children are asking. Mom, why do we keep going to wars when more people will die? Why can't we live in peace? I did not have an easy answer, but I will tell you this. Governments that normalized Hezbollah were all accomplices in where we are today. For years, the world looked the other way, privileging their dealing with Iran. For years, they treated an illegal non-state actor as a political reality, to be managed rather than a violation to be ended. For years, the world asked us to tolerate intolerance. Simultaneously, the Lebanese feel helpless and alone in the face of Israel's aggression. Dismissing international law, the global community has validated the rule of the strongest. This double standard has turned Lebanon into a graveyard for the very principles this council was built to uphold. We were told that accepting this parallel reality was the price of stability. But look at where that fragile stability has led us and the whole region. Today, I speak in the name of most Lebanese when I say, we don't want this stability. We want a solution. What is common sense and minimum norms of living in your countries are still a matter of discussion and disagreements in mine. Although for decades, the international community has outlined the framework needed to address this problem. Security Council resolutions 1559 and 1701 clearly affirm that there must be no weapons outside the authority of the Lebanese state, and that armed militias must be disarmed. These resolutions are not abstract principles. They are the internationally recognized roadmap for restoring stability and state authority in Lebanon. But they failed, and they failed because of the recklessness of some and the false promises of others. Today, the Lebanese government has begun to take important steps in this direction. Decisions have been made to outlaw unauthorized military and security activities of Hezbollah. Today, there is a growing recognition within the Lebanese institutions to reclaim the monopoly of arms and with it, national decision-making. At the center of this effort stands the Lebanese armed forces. The Lebanese armed forces are the sole legitimate defender of the country. Their success is not only a Lebanese priority. It is the only viable path to preventing Lebanon from becoming a permanent gray zone of proxy warfare in the region. Help them disarm Hezbollah and prevent Iranian interference and dominance, and protect our Lebanese borders from Israeli invasion. Supporting the Lebanese armed forces should therefore not be viewed as charity or assistance. It is an investment in regional stability. A couple of days ago, our president and prime minister launched a diplomatic initiative towards Israel. They laid the ground to the only solution to this war, ending the daily Israeli aggressions, obtaining their total withdrawal from our land, and allowing our people to return to their homes, while guaranteeing Hezbollah's disarmament. They even went further by suggesting to end the 80-year-old state of war between Lebanon and Israel. Because we Lebanese want to live in peace. Because we Lebanese deserve peace. A sustainable peace based on justice that would allow us to have a future, to have a life, a simple one, without fear, in which we can aim for our prosperity and well-being like other people. A life to live, not only to survive. Lebanon, Mr. President, is not a mere geographic entity for this council to manage. It is a founding member of the United Nations that contributed to drafting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's an idea of liberty and diversity that shouldn't fail, that cannot fail. Mr. President, members of the Council, I wish I could have been personally with you today, so I can look in the eyes of those who played a role in this turmoil and tell them what our ambassador Ghassan Touaini once said in the same room in 1978. Let my people live. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harfouch, for your courage and for that important briefing. And I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La France a demandé, face à une situation urgente et dramatique, la tenue de cette réunion, demande à laquelle se sont associés Bahreïn, le Danemark, la Grèce, la Lettonie, la République démocratique du Congo et le Royaume-Uni. Je vous remercie de l'avoir organisée et je remercie pour leurs exposés Madame la secrétaire générale adjointe aux affaires politiques et à la conciliation de la paix, Rosemary Di Carlo, Monsieur le secrétaire général adjoint aux opérations de paix, Monsieur Jean-Pierre Lacroix, et Monsieur le secrétaire général adjoint aux affaires humanitaires, Tom Fletcher, ainsi que Madame Lynn Harfouch pour la société libanaise. Nous saluons aussi la participation à nos débats de Monsieur le représentant du Liban, Monsieur le représentant d'Israël, Monsieur le représentant de la Syrie et Madame la représentante de Chypre. Monsieur le Président, la guerre s'étend une fois de plus au Liban. Le Hezbollah a fait le choix inacceptable et irresponsable de se joindre aux attaques iraniennes contre Israël, entraînant depuis plus de 10 jours le Liban dans un conflit dans lequel les autorités, comme le peuple libanais, refusent d'être entraînées. Les populations en payent le prix fort. Côté libanais, plus de 500 morts, des centaines de blessés et au moins 750 000 déplacés provoqués par les opérations militaires israéliennes et les ordres d'évacuation. Côté israélien, plusieurs blessés, une population contrainte de se réfugier plusieurs fois par jour dans les abris. Cette situation n'est pas acceptable. La France apporte tout son soutien aux autorités libanaises et à la décision courageuse qu'elles ont prise, le 2 mars, d'interdire absolument les activités militaires et de sécurité du Hezbollah. Elle les appelle à mettre en œuvre sans plus attendre ces décisions essentielles. Le Hezbollah doit mettre un terme immédiat à ses attaques contre Israël. Il doit remettre ses armes. Il doit cesser de prendre en otage le peuple libanais au service d'une guerre conduite par Téhéran contre Israël. De son côté, Israël doit respecter la souveraineté et l'intégrité territoriale du Liban et renoncer à toute intervention terrestre d'envergure et à toute occupation durable du territoire libanais, dont l'histoire montre qu'elle ne ferait ces interventions, cette occupation, qu'offrir un foyer à de nouvelles instabilités plutôt qu'à une paix durable. Les civils, qu'ils soient libanais ou israéliens, ne sauraient en aucun cas être pris pour cible. Le respect des règles du droit international humanitaire encadrant la conduite des hostilités, en particulier les principes de distinction, de proportionnalité et de précaution, ce respect est essentiel pour que soit assurée la protection des populations civiles et des infrastructures civiles en toutes circonstances. Les attaques délibérées contre la FINUL sont inacceptables. La France condamne avec la plus grande fermeté celle du 6 mars 2026, à l'issue de laquelle 3 casques bleus ghanéens ont été blessés. et nous exprimons toute notre solidarité à l'égard du Ghana. La protection des casques bleus doit être garantie en toutes circonstances et par toutes les parties. Dans ce contexte difficile, la France salue le courage, le professionnalisme et l'engagement des personnels de la force et de tous les pays contributeurs de troupes. Monsieur le Président, la poursuite de la guerre n'est pas une fatalité et une solution diplomatique est possible. Nous poursuivons nos échanges, y compris au niveau du Président de la République, avec les autorités libanaises et israéliennes, afin de parvenir à une désescalade. Nous appuyons les efforts de médiation de l'ONU. La voie à suivre est claire. Mettre pleinement en œuvre l'accord de cessez-le-feu du 26 novembre 2024, ainsi que la résolution 1701 du Conseil de sécurité, en continuant de s'appuyer sur le mécanisme mis en place en novembre 2024. C'est ce cadre reconnu par les parties qui pourra permettre de stabiliser la situation le long de la ligne bleue, d'offrir des garanties de sécurité aux deux pays et de restaurer l'intégrité territoriale du Liban. Nous saluons dans cette perspective la proposition du président Aoun de relancer des négociations directes entre le Liban et Israël. Il nous faut dans le même temps, dès à présent, venir en aide collectivement au peuple libanais, auquel nous exprimons toute notre solidarité. La France est pleinement mobilisée pour atteindre cet objectif. Nous avons déjà accordé une aide d'urgence de 6 millions d'euros aux organisations humanitaires présentes sur place, dont le Haut-Commissariat pour les réfugiés, et nous saluons l'engagement humanitaire de l'ONU. La France permettra l'acheminement de plusieurs dizaines de tonnes de frais humanitaires prochainement, dont des médicaments. Par ailleurs, la France finance la mise en œuvre de projets de terrain visant à répondre aux besoins essentiels des populations déplacées. Ces projets s'inscriront dans le cadre des efforts engagés par le gouvernement libanais pour répondre à la crise. Enfin, il est crucial d'intensifier le soutien aux forces armées libanaises, qui ont pour mission, dans ce contexte difficile, de poursuivre le désarmement du Hezbollah. La France a annoncé la livraison de véhicules blindés à destination des FAL afin de les soutenir dans cette mission. La France reste résolument engagée en faveur de la souveraineté et de la stabilité du Liban, et elle organisera à Paris, dès que la situation le permettra, la conférence internationale destinée à renforcer les forces armées libanaises. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of France for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. I thank Under-Secretary Generals De Carlo, Lacroix and Fletcher for briefing us today, as well as Ms. Harfouche for your powerful testimony. I also welcome the participation of the permanent representatives of Lebanon and other countries of the region in our meeting. President, the United Kingdom joined the call for this meeting alongside European and other partners to address the serious escalation of violence across the Blue Line and in Lebanon. We strongly condemn Lebanese Hezbollah's ongoing attacks against Israel and the region, which must cease. These actions, on behalf of the Iranian regime, have cost lives and have once again drawn Lebanese civilians into a conflict they do not want. As we heard from the briefers today, the escalating violence has already had a devastating impact on civilians on both sides of the Blue Line. We do not want to see a widening conflict in Lebanon. We are concerned by the civilian impact of Israeli military action in Lebanon, including large-scale displacement. Access to essential and life-saving medical services is also becoming much more difficult, as we heard, with 5 hospitals reportedly closed due to the fighting. We call upon Israel to uphold its obligations under international law, including with regard to protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. The United Kingdom is working closely with the Lebanese government and humanitarian partners to support those affected by the current escalation. President, the United Kingdom expresses its strong support to UNIFIL and urges respect for the mission's freedom of movement as it implements its mandate. We are deeply concerned by the 6 March strike on UNIFIL, which seriously injured several Ghanaian peacekeepers. I take this opportunity to express our hopes for their swift and full recovery from their injuries. We once again underscore that attacks on peacekeepers are completely unacceptable and we urge all parties to ensure the safety and security of UNIFIL personnel in accordance with international law. In closing, the United Kingdom welcomes President Aoun's call for direct negotiations between the governments of Israel and Lebanon. We encourage both governments to engage diplomatically and work towards de-escalation and full implementation of Resolution 1701. We also commend the decision by the Lebanese government to ban all Hezbollah's military activities. We continue to support the Lebanese armed forces as the sole legitimate armed force in Lebanon. Expansion of the conflict across the Blue Line is in no one's interest and risks further destabilizing Lebanon and exacerbating the regional crisis. We are committed to playing a full diplomatic role in efforts to secure lasting peace and security for the people of Lebanon and the people of Israel. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank the three Undersecretary Generals for their sobering updates and Ms. Hafouche for important messages. Mr. President, the situation in the Middle East is extremely fragile. At this time of heightened tension, any escalation carries serious risk for regional peace and security. That is why Denmark was part of the call for this emergency meeting, together with France, Greece, Latvia, and the United Kingdom. Our message today is simple. There is an urgent need to de-escalate and to resume the cessation of hostilities agreement. Hezbollah's action risks dragging Lebanon into a broader regional war against the will and interest of the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people. We strongly condemn Hezbollah's decision to attack Israel and their support for Iran, and we call for all those attacks to cease immediately. On its part, Israel must exercise the right to self-defense in accordance with international law and abstain from further escalating the situation. We urge Israel to withdraw its forces from occupied areas in Lebanon in line with the November 2024 cessation of hostilities agreement. We call for respect for Lebanese sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence in line with Resolution 1701. This will also allow for a gradual establishment and control by the Lebanese armed forces in southern Lebanon, paving the way for the exclusive state control with arms in the country. As a result of the recent outbreak of hostilities, in the past week alone, more than 550 Lebanese civilians have been killed. Denmark underlines that all parties must respect international law, including international humanitarian law, and that the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure must be ensured. Over 700,000 civilians have been forced to evacuate, creating large waves of internally displaced within Lebanon. Thousands more have crossed into Syria. All of those places additional strain on Lebanon, whose people have already suffered from large-scale economic and humanitarian challenges as a result of decades of conflict, mismanagement, external interference, and regional instability. A strong, stable, and secure Lebanon would contribute to Israel's safety. This can only materialize, however, if the parties focus on de-escalation and dialogue, and it requires that Hezbollah stops its attacks. Mr. President, Lebanese society has historically been, and remains to this day, a mosaic of diversity. This diversity is a distinct strength. However, it must remain so. In the past decade, Lebanon has shown immense generosity and resilience in housing more than 1 million refugees from neighboring Syria. New massive waves of internal displacement carry the risk of sectarian strife. This must be avoided at all costs. We urge the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people to prioritize national unity and social cohesion in the face of the current conflict. The Lebanese government has also shown courage and will to take on historic challenges, and even if much remains to be done, progress has been made in disarming Hezbollah and implementing economic reforms. The current conflict risks rolling back these positive steps. Mr. President, against this backdrop, UNIFIL's presence in southern Lebanon is more important than ever. We fully support UNIFIL in exercising the task mandated by this Council, and recall that peacekeepers are protected by international law. Reports of attacks on UNIFIL personnel are deeply worrying, and our thoughts go to the wounded Ghanaian peacekeepers. Any deliberate targeting of peacekeepers is unacceptable. The current volatile situation only underscored the need for UNIFIL and for a strong and continuous UN presence in Lebanon, including after UNIFIL's drawdown by December 2026. Mr. President, in closing, Lebanon must not become another front in an already dangerous and volatile regional landscape. Its people, who have already suffered for so much and so long, must not be dragged into another man-made humanitarian emergency. We call on all actors to step back from the brink and return to negotiations and peaceful dialogue. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me to begin by thanking the United States, the presidents of this Council, for convening this meeting on such a short notice. And Latvia also joined the call for this meeting to take place. I thank the USG DiCarlo, USG Fletcher, and USG Lacroix for their briefings. And I also thank Ms. Lynn Harfouch for her insights. The current escalation in Lebanon has serious consequences for the civilian populations and for the security of UN peacekeepers, as well as the stability of the region and global security. And we commend the exceptional service of UNIFIL as it continues to carry out its mandate under Resolution 1701, monitoring this conflict even in the direst circumstances. All essential personnel, including those from my country, are still remaining in place in the midst of hostilities. Mr. President, Hezbollah has chosen to attack Israel in support of Iran and has dragged the people of Lebanon into a conflict they have no part in. And it brings more suffering to the civilian population and endangers the fragile progress of the Lebanese government attempting to assert state control over its territory. Hezbollah's escalation is part of the pattern, as Iran consistently uses proxy networks to destabilize the Middle East, attacks countries in the region, and enables aggression in Europe. And it must stop now. Hezbollah must immediately disarm and stop all actions against Israel, but we commend the Lebanese government's decision of 2nd March to declare all Hezbollah military and security activities illegal in the whole territory of Lebanon. As Lebanon's Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, has warned of a looming humanitarian crisis, and we heard also from our briefers, with more than 700 persons forcibly displaced and more than 870 people lacking basic supplies, we strongly reiterate the vital need for all sides to respect international humanitarian law. With over 500 people killed, we call on all parties to ensure adherence to principles of proportionality and distinction of civilian objects. While we recognize Israel's right to self-defense, our concern lies with the human cost that is already piling high with Israel's operations against Hezbollah, including in densely populated areas. We urge the cessation of all hostilities and return to the ceasefire. We call for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon to be respected, as reflected in Resolution 1701 and the UN Charter. The safety and security of UN personnel and property must be respected by all sides and at all times. We call upon all members of this Council to continue stressing the crucial importance of upholding commitments agreed in Security Council Resolutions 2518 and 2730. Latvia, as UNIFIL troop contributing country, is especially distressed by the fact that amidst heavy firing, 3 UNIFIL peacekeepers from Ghana were injured inside their base in South Lebanon, and our thoughts are with the injured, and we wish them speedy recovery. The current escalation only reiterates the need for a long-term solution of this conflict, and it is essential that the withdrawal of UNIFIL does not result in a security vacuum. We welcome the political commitment of the Lebanese government to extend its authority throughout the country and the implementation of the disarmament plan. And the continued international support in these efforts remains essential. And we continue to stand by Lebanon and its people. And we look forward to the UN Secretary-General report in June and Council's continued work on solutions for providing security support of Lebanon. Mr. President, we commend all mediation efforts and it is important that the Security Council supports these processes in any way possible. We cannot allow the progress that Lebanon has achieved over the past 20 years to vanish. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Latvia for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to thank today's briefers, USGs DiCarlo, Lacroix, and Fletcher for their thorough remarks. I also wish to thank Ms. Lynn Harfouch for her compelling message. I welcome the presence of the permanent representatives of Lebanon, Israel, the Syrian Arab Republic, and Cyprus in today's meeting. Greece, alongside France, Denmark, Latvia, and the UK, called for today's briefing due to the dangerous escalation in Lebanon, and an escalation which bears serious consequences for the civilian population and for UNIFIL peacekeepers. Mr. President, Lebanon is the victim of a war it did not choose. We strongly condemn the attacks of Hezbollah acting in support of Iran against Israel, which triggered this round of escalation. Hezbollah constitutes a threat to regional stability. Hezbollah has no right to unilaterally drag the Lebanese people into misery and despair. The Lebanese state is the sole legitimate authority which can conduct military operations and define Lebanon's foreign relations. Hezbollah must disarm immediately and stop all actions against Israel. In the midst of these developments, we welcome and commend the decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers to ban Hezbollah's military activities. The resolve of the Lebanese leadership to extend its exclusive control over arms is clear. It should be given a chance to bring security and prosperity to Lebanon. We should all be standing by their side. Its steadfast commitment did not falter in the face of developments. Instead, it seems to have been strengthened. We reaffirm our support for the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political independence of Lebanon. Lebanese sovereignty must be fully respected, and civilians must be protected in accordance with international law. Mr. President, as the spiral of escalation accelerates, we call for maximum restraint and the protection of civilians and infrastructure. Restraint can be a virtue in times of crisis, and indicative of strength and resolve, not weakness. As the Greek Prime Minister said in his telephone conversations with the leaders of Israel and Lebanon, Greece recognizes the right of Israel to defend itself according to international law. However, further escalation must be avoided, similar to the undertaking of prolonged large-scale military operations in the Lebanese south, which risks plunging the region in more instability and conflict. Full respect of Security Council Resolution 1701 and the ceasefire agreement of 2024 is a prerequisite for stability. As our briefers described, Lebanon is faced with a profound humanitarian challenge. More than 700,000 civilians have been displaced, while dozens are dead and injured, and children are caught in the midst of this chaos. The risk of instability spilling over to the broader region in the form of extensive refugee flows is all too real. According to the International Organization for Migration, some 50,000 Syrians left Lebanon for Syria in the past week alone. Greece is participating in international humanitarian efforts in support of Lebanon and its reconstruction. We stand ready to participate in the conference in support of the Lebanese armed forces in Paris, spearheaded by France and Saudi Arabia, when it takes place. We also continue to assist Lebanon in its efforts to forge strong state institutions, including the LAF. It is a pledge made by the Greek Prime Minister to President Aoun, which has already produced concrete results. These include the recently procured defense material to the Lebanese armed forces to enhance their capabilities. We are committed to continuing our support to the Lebanese armed forces. At the same time, also, in line with the latest communication between our Prime Minister and President Aoun, we remain in constant contact with the competent Lebanese authorities. We are finalizing our contribution to address the grave humanitarian crisis on the ground. Mr. President, Greece condemns the incident resulting in the injury of 3 UNIFIL Ghanaian peacekeepers amidst heavy firing. The safety and security of UN personnel and property must be respected at all times. We call on parties to engage constructively through dialogue and diplomacy, potentially turning a crisis into an opportunity for long-term peaceful coexistence in the region. In this context, we welcome the Lebanese leadership's openness to engage diplomatically with Israel towards a peaceful settlement. In conclusion, as the Greek Prime Minister stated alongside the French and Cypriot presidents in the Republic of Cyprus yesterday, Lebanon, which we fully support, merits a better future, certainly one beyond the plans and purposes of other outside forces. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Признательны заместителю генсекретаря ООН по политическим вопросам и миростроительству госпоже Розмари Ди Карло, заместителю генерального секретаря по операциям в пользу мира господину Жану Пьеру Лакруа и заместителю генерального секретаря по гуманитарным вопросам господину Тому Флетчеру за обстоятельные доклады по ситуации в Ливане. Внимательно выслушали представителя гражданского общества. Господин председатель, сегодняшнее внеочередное заседание Совета Безопасности в связи с новым витком конфронтации в Ливане проходит на фоне и в прямой увязке с беспрецедентным обострением общей обстановки на Ближнем Востоке, вызванного продолжающейся агрессией США и Израиля против Ирана. Как бы ни старались наши западные партнеры вывернуть все наизнанку и исказить суть происходящего, но именно американо-израильская военная авантюра все глубже погружает обширный регион в хаос, унося все большее число человеческих жизней и нанося непоправимый ущерб объектам гражданской инфраструктуры. Тяжелейшие последствия уже ощущают на себе многие дружественные нам ближневосточные страны. К сожалению, не стала исключением и Ливанская республика, вновь подвергшаяся масштабным ударам со стороны Израиля. Показательно, что еще до нынешнего обострения в израильском руководстве неоднократно и открыто угрожали Ливану возобновлением масштабных боевых действий. Судя по публичным комментариям представителей Генштаба ВС Израиля, планы по зачистке ливанской территории вынашивались давно. Одновременно израильтяне постоянно нарушали достигнутые при посредничестве США и Франции договоренности от 1924 года, как в части отвода своих подразделений к югу от Голубой линии, так и в плане прекращения произвольных атак и ударов по ливанской территории. Господин председатель, хотели бы подчеркнуть, что мы всегда разделяли и по-прежнему понимаем законные озабоченности израильских партнеров по вопросам обеспечения безопасности страны. С пониманием относимся и к мотивам, побудившим Западный Иерусалим начать военную операцию против Ливана. Совершенная 2 марта военная акция против Израиля и последовавшие за ней ракетно-дроновые атаки на центральную часть страны не могут не вызывать тревогу и крайнее беспокойство. В то же время считаем, что предпринимаемые на протяжении почти 10 дней ответные действия Цахал носят непропорциональный и чрезмерный характер. Как следует из регулярных сводок секретариата ООН, израильтяне игнорируют нормы международного гуманитарного права, осуществляют удары, в том числе по гражданским объектам, что ведет к многочисленным жертвам среди мирного населения. Только за последние 4 дня израильская армия атаковала свыше 60 населенных пунктов. Наглядно о непропорциональности ответа Западного Иерусалима говорит статистика жертв ползучего израильского вторжения. По данным Минздрава Ливана, со 2 марта погибли порядка 600 человек, включая 80 детей. Число раненых исчисляется сотнями. Одновременно, практически ежедневно, израильское командование публикует эвакуационные предупреждения для густонаселенных районов Ливана, включая южные и столичные пригороды, что вызывает массовую панику у местных жителей. Сотни тысяч людей вынуждены покидать свои дома в поисках убежища. Число внутренне перемещенных лиц оценивается в 800 тысяч человек, которые в условиях острых социально-экономических проблем Ливана неминуемо столкнутся с проблемами доступа к базовым потребностям, включая продукты питания. Господин председатель, продолжающаяся эскалация, помимо тяжелых гуманитарных последствий, ставит под угрозу защиту и сохранность объектов культурного значения в Ливане. В рамках прошлых израильских военных кампаний мы стали свидетелями серьезных разрушений исторических памятников Арабской Республики, в том числе объектов в Баальбеке и Тире, внесенных в список всемирного наследия ЮНЕСКО. Нынешняя же операция Израиля напрямую затронула действующий в координации с Россотрудничеством Дом русской культуры в городе Набате. 8 марта в результате целенаправленного ракетного удара пятиэтажное здание, на первом этаже которого располагался Дом русской культуры, было уничтожено. Решительно осуждаем произошедшую атаку, расценивая ее как акт военной агрессии против учреждения, действующего исключительно в гуманитарных и просветительских целях. В нем на протяжении долгого времени занимались в том числе и ливанские дети. Никакой военной активности там не осуществлялось. Вновь предупреждаем о неприемлемости неизбирательных ударов по гражданским объектам и дипломатическим представительствам в Ливанской Республике. 8 марта были убиты 4 сотрудников посольства Ирана в Бейруте. Вчера под удар попало генконсульство России в Исфагане. Осуждаем все нападения на диппредставительства, где бы они ни происходили. Недопустимым видится и нападение на персонал временных сил ООН в Ливане, дислоцированных на юге страны. В данном контексте присоединяемся к позиции генсекретаря ООН, осудившего 6 марта инцидент против контингентов СООНУ, в ходе которого 3 ганских военнослужащих получили ранения. Желаем им скорейшего выздоровления и выступаем за безусловное обеспечение гарантий безопасности голубых касок. Господин председатель, в нынешних взрывоопасных условиях призываем Западный Иерусалим отказаться от силовых методов взаимодействия с Ливаном и вернуться к выполнению взятых на себя международно-правовых обязательств, в том числе согласно резолюции СБ 1701. Вместо пагубной линии на конфронтацию израильскому руководству пора прислушаться к позиции Бейрута в пользу срочной деэскалации и готовности к прямым переговорам с Израилем. Немаловажное значение в данном контексте имеет и взятый самими ливанскими властями курс на укрепление государственных институтов и установление контроля над всеми частями страны. Со своей стороны подтверждаем нашу неизменную позицию в поддержку суверенитета, единства и территориальной целостности Ливана, а также мандатов СООНу в соответствии с профильными резолюциями СБ ООН. Убеждены в безальтернативности скорейшей остановки боевых действий, возвращения к политико-гуманитарным усилиям и востребованности реальных шагов по прекращению большой войны на Ближнем Востоке. Рассчитываем, что дипломатические возможности еще не исчерпаны. Стороны проявят необходимую политическую волю и откажутся от дальнейшего насилия. Именно этими задачами мы руководствовались при подготовке российского проекта резолюции СБ ООН в связи с эскалацией на Ближнем Востоке, который будет рассматриваться сегодня Советом Безопасности. Наш документ, в отличие от текста, который продвигается нашими бахрейнскими коллегами, носит неконфронтационный характер и на деле учитывает региональное измерение нынешних событий, в том числе страдания ливанского народа. Я благодарю за внимание.
I thank the representative of Russia for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
谢谢主席，我感谢迪卡洛副秘书长、拉克鲁瓦副秘书长、弗莱彻副秘书长和哈夫什女士的通报。当前，中东战火升级蔓延，离以局势也骤然升温。战事持续下去不符合任何一方的利益。国际社会应当汇聚促和努力，尽快推动缓和紧张局势，恢复地区和平稳定。第一，要推动立即停火止战。近期，真主党同以色列持续交火，以色列对黎巴嫩南部城镇和贝鲁特发动猛烈袭击，扩大对离南部军事控制，已经导致570多人丧生，其中包括大量妇女儿童。我们注意到，伊朗向安理会致函指出，4名伊朗外交人员在袭击中遇难。冲突中保护平民是国际法的红线，中方谴责任何针对平民和外交人员的袭击，呼吁各方停止敌对行动，推动局势缓和降温，履行国际法，特别是国际人道法义务。以色列应立即从黎巴嫩撤军。我们欢迎黎巴嫩政府致力于结束冲突的积极表态，支持维护黎巴嫩主权、安全和领土完整。第二，要支持黎巴嫩稳定国内局势。炮火严重冲击黎巴嫩安全稳定，70多万人被迫流离失所，本已艰难的人道形势更加雪上加霜。国际社会应加大对黎巴嫩援助力度，支持黎巴嫩政府稳定国内局势，保障基本民生。我们注意到，黎巴嫩议会决定延长任期，欢迎黎巴嫩政府推进对国家管控的努力，希望黎巴嫩国内各方积极开展政治对话，妥善化解分歧。第三，要切实保障联黎部队人员安全。3月6日发生联黎部队遇袭事件，造成3名维和人员受伤。中方强烈谴责针对联黎部队的袭击，对伤员表示慰问。任何蓄意攻击联合国维和人员的行为，都严重违反国际人道法和安理会第1701号决议，必须坚决反对并予以追责。当前紧张局势再次凸显联黎部队的重要作用，中方敦促各方切实保障联黎部队的安全和行动自由，保障联黎部队积极履职。中方愿同国际社会一道，为推动平息黎以局势、恢复黎巴嫩和中东地区和平稳定做出不懈努力。谢谢主席。
I thank the representative of China for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
السيد الرئيس، بداية يطيب لي أن أتقدم بالشكر للجمهورية الفرنسية على عقد هذه الإحاطة المهمة، حيث انضمت مملكة البحرين والدنمارك واليونان ولاتفيا والمملكة المتحدة لهذا الطلب. كما أشكر كل من السيدة روزماري دي كارلو وكيلة الأمين العام للشؤون السياسية وبناء السلام، والسيد توم فليتشر وكيل الأمين العام للشؤون الإنسانية ومنسق الإغاثة في حالات الطوارئ، والسيد جان بيير لكوا وكيل الأمين العام لعمليات السلام، والسيدة لينا حرفوش، على ما قدموه من إحاطات مهمة وقيمة. ورحب بجميع المندوبين الدائمين. السيد الرئيس، تعرب مملكة البحرين عن أسفها العميق إزاء التصعيد العسكري الخطير الذي تشهده المنطقة في الآونة الأخيرة نتيجة الاعتداءات الإيرانية غير المبررة، والتي طالت بلاد مملكة البحرين وعددا من الدول العربية الشقيقة في انتهاك واضح لمبادئ حسن الجوار واحترام سيادة الدول، وخرقا جسيما للقانون الدولي وميثاق الأمم المتحدة. وتطالب مملكة البحرين الجمهورية الإسلامية الإيرانية بالوقف الفوري لهذه الأعمال العدائية والكف عن استخدام أذرعها وميليشياتها المسلحة في المنطقة وخارجها، وتحذر من أن استمرار هذه الممارسات العدوانية السافرة من شأنه أن يؤدي إلى مزيد من التصعيد وتفاقم التوترات القائمة بما قد يترتب عليه من تداعيات خطيرة على الأمن والاستقرار الإقليميين. سيد الرئيس، تؤكد مملكة البحرين دعمها لوحدة الجمهورية اللبنانية وسيادتها واستقلالها وسلامة أراضيها، وتدعم جهود بسط سلطة الدولة اللبنانية على كامل أراضيها بما يعزز مؤسساتها الدستورية ويحفظ الأمن والاستقرار ويحقق تطلعات شعبها الشقيق للحياة الحرة الكريمة والنماء والازدهار. كما تشدد على أهمية تجنيب لبنان تداعيات التصعيد الإقليمي وترفض أي محاولات لإقحامه في الصراعات الإقليمية الدائرة. وترحب مملكة البحرين بقرار مجلس الوزراء اللبناني الصادر في 2 مارس لعام 2026 بشأن الحظر الفوري لكافة النشاطات الأمنية والعسكرية لحزب الله، وحصر نشاطه في الإطار السياسي والقانوني، إلى جانب بدء تنفيذ المرحلة الثانية من خطة حصر السلاح بيد الدولة اللبنانية ومؤسساتها الشرعية، ولا سيما الجيش اللبناني والقوى الأمنية الرسمية. ونؤكد أن هذه الخطوة تمثل تطوراً مهماً، وهي ضرورة حتمية نحو ترسيخ سيادة الدولة اللبنانية وتعزيز مؤسساتها بما ينسجم مع الدستور اللبناني والقرارات الدولية ذات الصلة، وفي مقدمتها قرار مجلس الأمن 1701 واتفاق الطائف، ويسهم في تعزيز الاستقرار الداخلي وتعزيز قدرة الدولة اللبنانية على الاطلاع بمسؤولياتها الوطنية والحفاظ على أمن لبنان واستقراره. كما ترحب المملكة بدعوة فخامة الرئيس اللبناني جوزيف عون إلى إجراء مفاوضات مباشرة مع إسرائيل برعاية دولية للتوصل إلى وقف فوري لإطلاق النار في لبنان. سيد الرئيس، تتابع مملكة البحرين بقلق ما رصدته قوة الأمم المتحدة المؤقتة في لبنان اليونيفيل من انتهاكات لاتفاق وقف إطلاق النار المبرم بين لبنان وإسرائيل في نوفمبر 2024 من خلال الهجمات التي تبناها حزب الله ضد إسرائيل، مما أدى إلى التصعيد العسكري الذي تشهده الأراضي اللبنانية، والذي أسفر عن نزوح مدنيين وتفاقم الأوضاع الإنسانية بما قد يخلف تداعيات تمتد إلى الدول المجاورة وتزيد الضغوط على مواردها واستقرارها. وفي هذا السياق نؤكد ضرورة التزام جميع الأطراف باتفاق وقف إطلاق النار والامتناع عن أي أعمال تقوضه، مع التأكيد على أن حماية المدنيين وتخفيف المعاناة الإنسانية يجب أن تبقى في صميم الجهود المشتركة. كما نشدد على أمن وسلامة قوات حفظ السلام التابعة للأمم المتحدة، التزام قانوني وأخلاقي على جميع الأطراف، وأن أي اعتداء عليها يمثل انتهاكا واضحا لقرارات مجلس الأمن ذات الصلة. ونؤكد في الوقت ذاته أهمية أن يتم أي انسحاب تدريجي لقوة اليونيفيل بشكل منسق ومسؤول، بما يضمن عدم نشوء فراغ أمني في جنوب لبنان والحفاظ على الاستقرار في ظل الظروف الدقيقة التي تمر بها المنطقة. السيد الرئيس، يمثل تمكين الجيش اللبناني وتعزيز قدراته ركيزة أساسية لاستقرار لبنان والحفاظ على أمنه، ومن هذا المنطلق نؤكد أهمية تقديم الدعم اللازم له بما يعزز قدرته على الانتشار الفاعل في جنوب لبنان والقيام بمهامه في حفظ سيادة لبنان وأمنه واستقراره. كما نرحب بمبادرة الجمهورية الفرنسية لعقد مؤتمر دولي لدعم الجيش اللبناني وقوى الأمن الداخلي في أبريل 2026، ونثمن في الوقت ذاته الجهود التي تبذلها دول اللجنة الخماسية المعنية بلبنان، وهي الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية والمملكة العربية السعودية ودولة قطر وجمهورية مصر العربية والجمهورية الفرنسية في دعم لبنان سياسيا واقتصاديا وأمنيا خلال هذه المرحلة. وفي الختام، تجدد مملكة البحرين تأكيدها أن استقرار لبنان وسيادته يمثلان مصلحة إقليمية ودولية مشتركة، وتدعو جميع الأطراف إلى الالتزام بالقرارات الدولية ذات الصلة واحترام اتفاق وقف إطلاق النار والعمل على تجنيب لبنان والمنطقة مزيدا من التصعيد. وشكرا سيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente. Panamá agradece la convocatoria de esta sesión informativa, así como la información compartida por los expositores sobre la evolución de la situación en el Líbano. Saludamos a los representantes de los países que nos distinguen con su participación. Si bien en noviembre de 2024 se alcanzó un cese de hostilidades, los incidentes y violaciones a lo largo de la línea azul continuaron registrándose desde entonces, lo que pone de manifiesto la persistente falta de voluntad política que permita crear las condiciones pertinentes hacia la paz. Dirigencias que se sostienen sobre la lógica de la confrontación permanente terminan arrastrando a sus poblaciones a ciclos de destrucción que dejan tras de sí ciudades devastadas, familias desplazadas y generaciones marcadas por la guerra. Panamá condena los ataques lanzados desde territorio libanés contra Israel por parte de Hezbollah, que han obligado a comunidades a evacuar y buscar refugio. Estas acciones irresponsables son profundamente perjudiciales, tanto para la población civil libanesa como para las comunidades de refugiados presentes en el país, pues han contribuido a desencadenar una peligrosa dinámica de escalada que ha derivado en una respuesta militar de gran intensidad y en un deterioro aún mayor de la situación humanitaria. Según cifras recientes de las autoridades libanesas y de organismos humanitarios, más de 700.000 personas han sido desplazadas dentro del Líbano en los últimos días, mientras que cerca de 600 personas han muerto, entre ellas decenas de niños, mujeres y trabajadores humanitarios y de rescate. Muchas de estas familias se encuentran ahora refugiadas en escuelas y albergues improvisados, lo que evidencia la magnitud de la crisis humanitaria en curso. Panamá pide la máxima contención y el cese inmediato de las hostilidades. Instamos a las partes a cumplir plenamente con sus obligaciones en virtud del derecho internacional, en particular el derecho internacional humanitario, y a adoptar todas las medidas necesarias para proteger a la población y la infraestructura civil. Panamá reitera su respaldo al Estado y al gobierno del Líbano, cuyos esfuerzos por preservar la estabilidad interna y fortalecer la autoridad del Estado en todo su territorio resultan esenciales, incluyendo el papel de las Fuerzas Armadas libanesas para asegurar que el monopolio y control de las armas corresponda exclusivamente al Estado. Tomamos nota de las recientes declaraciones del presidente del Líbano, Joseph Aoun, reiterando la disposición de su país a reanudar negociaciones con Israel destinadas a detener la actual escalada y las medidas anunciadas por las autoridades libanesas para restringir las acciones militares de Hezbollah. Reafirmamos nuestro reconocimiento pleno a la soberanía, integridad territorial e independencia política del Líbano en conformidad con sus fronteras internacionalmente reconocidas. Un Líbano seguro y estable, con instituciones capaces de ejercer plenamente su autoridad a través de las acciones que ha venido desarrollando la actual administración gubernamental libanesa, es indispensable para la estabilidad de toda la región. Señor presidente, el acompañamiento de las Naciones Unidas para preservar una relativa estabilidad a lo largo de la línea azul durante las últimas décadas ha sido y sigue siendo indispensable para evitar escaladas mayores de violencia. No obstante, en los últimos meses, la presencia de la Fuerza Provisional de las Naciones Unidas en el Líbano ha sufrido ataques en reiteradas ocasiones, aumentando así los riesgos para el personal y sus instalaciones, ataques que rechazamos enérgicamente. La semana pasada, 3 cascos azules del contingente de Ghana resultaron heridos mientras se encontraban dentro de una posición de la misión en el sur del Líbano. Los ataques o acciones que comprometen la seguridad e integridad del personal, las instalaciones y los bienes de las Naciones Unidas son inaceptables. Los cascos azules que cumplen mandatos de este Consejo, así como las posiciones e infraestructuras de la misión, deben ser respetados y protegidos en todo momento de conformidad con el derecho internacional. Panamá reitera su firme respaldo y apoyo a la labor de la Fuerza Provisional de las Naciones Unidas en el Líbano. Debemos recordar, además, que esa fuerza se encuentra en el último periodo de su mandato antes del proceso previsto de repliegue. Precisamente por ello resulta aún más importante preservar las condiciones de estabilidad en el terreno, asegurar la libertad de movimiento de la misión y permitirle cumplir plenamente las tareas que le ha encomendado este Consejo. Reiteramos el llamado urgente a la máxima contención y al cese inmediato de las hostilidades. Presidente, la situación actual vuelve a demostrar la importancia de la plena implementación y cumplimiento de la Resolución 1701 del Consejo de Seguridad. Esta resolución sigue siendo el marco fundamental para garantizar la estabilidad a lo largo de la línea azul y avanzar hacia una solución duradera. Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank USG DiCarlo, USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and Ms. Harfouch for the comprehensive and valuable briefings. Lebanon is a country of remarkable diversity, shaped by layers of civilization and a rich cultural and historical legacy. Its people have long shown resilience in the face of adversity, preserving a vibrant social fabric rooted in coexistence among communities and traditions. Lebanon needs a period of calm to pursue its objectives of peace and stability. The renewed escalation and hostilities are a matter of great concern. They threaten far more than infrastructure. They endanger civilian life and risk reversing the fragile political and security progress Lebanon had begun to make preceding the current crisis. In this context, allow me to make 4 points. First, Pakistan reiterates its full support for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We condemn in the strongest terms Israel's continued military aggression in southern Lebanon, which has resulted in the death of more than 400 civilians, including at least 83 children and 42 women, and over 600,000 people displaced. Sweeping illegal evacuation orders across large parts of southern Lebanon have deepened civilian suffering. The large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure and the blatant disregard for international humanitarian law must cease immediately. Second, the use of force must remain the exclusive prerogative of the Lebanese state through its legitimate institutions. In this regard, the Lebanese armed forces play a central role, and Pakistan supports efforts to strengthen their capacity and operational effectiveness. Pakistan welcomes the efforts of the government of Lebanon to restore stability and strengthen state authority, including the cabinet decision of 2nd March to reinforce national security structures. We also note Lebanon's de-escalation initiatives, including the 4-point plan advanced by its leadership to restore calm and stability. Third, Pakistan strongly condemns attacks on UN peacekeepers serving with UNIFIL, who have been injured in Israeli strikes. Peacekeepers operating under the UN flag carry out a vital mandate authorized by the Council. Their safety and security must be guaranteed at all times. Fourth, Israeli military activities in southern Lebanon, including the continued presence of forces and the establishment of positions inside Lebanese territory, are illegal and unacceptable. These Israeli actions, which are in contravention of international law, are also undermining the efforts of the government of Lebanon to ensure peace and stability in the country. We call for Israel's immediate, full, and unconditional withdrawal from all occupied Lebanese territories. Sustainable calm requires the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701 and unwavering respect for Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity along the Blue Line. Mr. President, we echo the Secretary General's deep concern regarding the regional military escalation since 28th February, which has gravely undermined the November 2024 cessation of hostilities agreement. The situation in Lebanon cannot be viewed in isolation from this broader escalation across the Middle East. Heightened confrontation and unjustified attacks on several brotherly countries, which Pakistan has condemned, have gravely aggravated regional security and stability. At this critical juncture, dialogue and diplomacy must prevail over confrontation. De-escalation, restraint, and renewed diplomatic engagement are urgently required to prevent further deterioration of the regional security environment. Only through sustained political dialogue and respect for international law can the region move towards stability and peace. To conclude, Mr. President, Pakistan stands firmly with the government and people of Lebanon. The international community must take urgent action to prevent further escalation, alleviate human suffering, and support Lebanon's efforts to restore peace and stability across its territory. I thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Señor presidente, agradezco a Estados Unidos en su calidad de presidente del Consejo de Seguridad para este mes por la organización de esta reunión. Asimismo, agradezco a la señora Rosemary DiCarlo, secretaria general adjunta de Asuntos Políticos y de Consolidación de la Paz, al señor Jean-Pierre Lacroix, secretario general adjunto de Operaciones de Paz, y al señor Tom Fletcher, secretario general adjunto de Asuntos Humanitarios y coordinador de socorro de emergencia. Asimismo, agradecemos a la briefer por su información. Señor presidente, los reportes oficiales y las noticias recientes evidencian que la situación humanitaria en Líbano es delicada. Al 7 de marzo, más de 100.000 personas estaban en refugios. Desde el 2 de marzo, casi 1 millón de personas habían sido desplazadas dentro del país. Cientos de miles más han sido afectadas por amplias órdenes de evacuación. Se ha registrado un elevado número de víctimas civiles incluidas mujeres y niños. También se han verificado ataques contra instalaciones sanitarias y la seguridad y la vida del personal de mantenimiento de la paz se ha visto comprometida. Estos hechos muestran una crisis que avanza con rapidez y que exige una respuesta internacional urgente. En los últimos 2 años hemos sido testigos de cómo, justamente en esta región, el uso de la fuerza y el desdén por el derecho internacional pueden afectar la vida de millones de personas. Colombia expresa su profunda preocupación por la grave escalada registrada en los últimos días en la región y a propósito de esta reunión por el deterioro de la situación en Líbano, instamos a todas las partes a respetar e implementar plenamente la resolución 1701, a ejercer la máxima contención y garantizar la protección tanto de la población civil como del personal de Naciones Unidas. Mi país está convencido de que es imprescindible insistir en el retorno a los medios pacíficos, el diálogo, la mediación y los mecanismos existentes de resolución de controversias deben emplearse con urgencia para facilitar una desescalada sostenida y crear condiciones que permitan proteger a las comunidades a ambos lados de la línea sur. Por otro lado, Colombia desea expresar su solidaridad con el pueblo libanés y con todas las víctimas afectadas por los hechos de las últimas semanas. El respeto de la soberanía, la independencia política y la integridad territorial del Líbano no es negociable. Reafirmamos que el pleno cumplimiento de la Carta de Naciones Unidas y de las resoluciones pertinentes del Consejo de Seguridad es crucial. Asimismo, reconocemos los esfuerzos del gobierno por mantener el control efectivo de su territorio y los pasos que se han tomado para evitar el escalamiento de las hostilidades y evitar que el país sea arrastrado a un conflicto más amplio. Las decisiones recientes del gobierno libanés, incluyendo la propuesta de 4 puntos anunciada por su presidente, son expresiones del esfuerzo por lograr una desescalada rápida de la situación y proteger a su población. En lo referente a la dimensión humanitaria, la situación exige medidas inmediatas y prácticas. Es imprescindible habilitar accesos y corredores seguros para la asistencia, asegurar garantías de seguridad para el personal humanitario y establecer servicios esenciales en las áreas afectadas por las hostilidades. Estas acciones son condición previa para la protección efectiva de los civiles y la estabilización de la situación sobre el terreno. Recordamos que las partes están obligadas a respetar los principios correspondientes del derecho internacional humanitario. El cumplimiento estricto de estas obligaciones es esencial para frenar el deterioro y preservar la vida y la dignidad humanas. Señor presidente, Colombia condena cualquier ataque al personal de Naciones Unidas y enfatiza que la protección de su personal y la inviolabilidad de sus sedes es esencial. Todas las partes tienen la obligación jurídica y moral de garantizar su seguridad de conformidad con el derecho internacional y con las decisiones del Consejo de Seguridad. Cualquier amenaza o ataque socava la capacidad de la ONU para mantener la paz y seguridad internacionales, verificar hechos y prestar asistencia humanitaria. Deseamos condenar el ataque que tuvo lugar el 6 de marzo y expresamos solidaridad con los miembros de la misión que resultaron afectados. UNIFIL continúa desempeñando un papel indispensable, trabajando con dedicación para prevenir la escalada de tensiones y proteger a las comunidades civiles. Colombia reitera su apoyo y su reconocimiento a las y los miembros de la misión, entendiendo que su labor en un contexto tan complejo es fundamental. Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3, namely the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, and my own country, Somalia. We thank USG DiCarlo, USG Lacroix, and USG Fletcher for their comprehensive briefings. We also thank Ms. Lynn Harfouch for her valuable contribution. We welcome the participation of the representative of Lebanon in today's meeting. The A3 views the escalation of hostilities in Lebanon since the beginning of March with the utmost gravity and concern. We are deeply alarmed by the mounting toll on human life and the destruction of civilian infrastructure, including densely populated residential areas. Furthermore, as reported by UNICEF, nearly 700,000 people, including 200,000 children, have been forced from their homes, adding to the tens of thousands already uprooted from previous attacks. In that regard, we call for the protection of civilians and full adherence to international humanitarian law and international human rights law. The A3 is also gravely concerned about the March 6th incident against the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, which resulted in injuries to 3 Ghanaian peacekeepers at their position in Al-Ghawza. This is a stark reminder of the perils faced by peacekeepers in Lebanon. The safety and security of United Nations personnel and property are not negotiable. They must be respected at all times and without exception. We wish a swift and complete recovery to all the injured peacekeepers. Mr. President, the A3 reaffirms its unwavering commitment to Lebanon's sovereignty, territorial integrity, unity, and political independence. Lebanon must not become a theater for proxy confrontations or unilateral territorial expansions. Respect for the blue line and the cessation of hostilities by all actors are essential for stability and the full implementation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701. We acknowledge the critical role UNIFIL continues to play in maintaining stability along the blue line. Its presence remains a critical element for the collective efforts to achieving peace in Lebanon and contribute to de-escalation. At the same time, the A3 underscores the importance of enhancing the capacity of the Lebanese armed forces to assume full responsibility for the defense of Lebanese territory. We urge the international community to intensify its support, including equipment, materials, and financial assistance to ensure their effective and sustainable deployment south of the Litani River. To conclude, Mr. President, the A3 calls for an immediate cessation of hostilities and an urgent return to the parameters of the 2024 ceasefire agreement. We emphasize that a renewed commitment to Resolution 1701 remains the primary framework for long-term stability. It's imperative that all parties prioritize dialogue and diplomacy over kinetic action to prevent a full-scale regional conflagration. Achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East is only viable through genuine commitment to diplomacy in accordance with international law and the UN Charter. We stand in solidarity with the people of Lebanon, and we urge this Council to act with unity and resolve to restore peace and uphold international law. I thank you.
Thank you to the representative of Somalia for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United States. I add my thanks and appreciation to all of our briefers today. Colleagues, the United States condemns the attacks that Hezbollah a longtime proxy of the Iranian regime, has launched against Israel. Hezbollah has yet again made it clear that it does not represent nor does it defend the people of Lebanon. It defends the interest of the Iranian regime. It is nothing more than a proxy and, frankly, an obstacle to Lebanon becoming a peaceful, stable, and functioning state, something I think we all would like to see and encourage. We recognize Israel's legitimate security needs and its right to defend itself from the Iranian regime and Hezbollah, which are two sides of the same coin. And we ask all of you, we ask our colleagues, how long will the world continue to tolerate the Iranian regime as the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, sowing havoc around the world as it seeks to export its so-called revolution? I ask you, what country can legitimately say it's better off or more stable because of Iranian influence over the decades? Yemen? No. Lebanon? No. Syria? Absolutely not. Iraq? No. They're all trying to rid themselves of this cancer that has spread over the decades, this disease of instability and chaos. Thankfully, the United States and this administration is taking bold action to do just that. But to the end of ridding itself of this violence, death, and destruction, the United States welcomes the absolutely historic, and we should recognize it for what it is. We welcome the March 2nd decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers to immediately prohibit Hezbollah's military and security activities. We applaud them. As the government of Lebanon said in its letter to this council on March 2nd, these activities, the activities of Hezbollah, disregard the will of the majority of the Lebanese people. In fact, it's endangering them. That statement is an absolutely historic milestone on the road to ending Hezbollah's long and destructive influence in Lebanon. The next milestone is implementation, and Lebanon's security services must enforce this policy and prosecute those who violate it. Now is the time for the government of Lebanon to take back control of the entirety of its country. The United States absolutely supports that endeavor and that mission. We urge our friends in Lebanon to not let this moment slip away. Our message is clear. Take your country back. And we are all too happy to apply the time and treasure necessary to do that. The United States also commends the actions of the Lebanese government to expel Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which has undermined Lebanese sovereignty for decades and provides oxygen, provides money, provides weapons to Hezbollah's terrorist plots in Lebanon and across the globe. The world must now come together in supporting Lebanon's efforts. The world must come together now in supporting Lebanon's efforts to exercise its sovereignty across every inch of Lebanese territory. The United States stands with the Lebanese people who were dragged into yet another war by Hezbollah at the behest of Iran. We are responding to the civilian consequences of this recklessness by providing immediate, life-saving humanitarian assistance to hundreds of thousands of now displaced Lebanese. Since 2012, the United States has provided more than $4.4 billion in humanitarian assistance to support Lebanon. And we commend the many humanitarians on the ground who are aiding in this effort. We also express our hopes for the full recovery for the UNIFIL peacekeepers who were recently injured. Peacekeepers take on exceptional risks in these conflict zones for the advancement of peace and security. We recognize that, and we call on all parties to respect the safety and security of these men and women as they assume this important role. Colleagues, the international community must unite in supporting the Lebanese government and our Israeli partners in the full implementation of Resolution 1701. I think we've seen real progress in that regard. This Council must condemn all acts that undermine Resolution 1701, and the way forward involves the international community standing firmly in support of Lebanon's efforts to exercise its territorial sovereignty and restore state authority. And we will continue to work alongside partners to create lasting peace and security in Lebanon. I thank you. I will resume my function as President of the Council, and I give the floor to the representative of Lebanon for his statement.
سيد الرئيس، أود أن أشكركم بداية على عقد هذه الجلسة الطارئة بناء على طلب الجمهورية الفرنسية ودعم كل من المملكة المتحدة، اليونان، الدنمارك، لاتفيا ومملكة البحرين. وأشكر أيضا السيدة ديكارلو والسيد لاكروا والسيد فليتشر والسيدة حرفوش على الإحاطات التي تقدموا بها. السيد الرئيس، نجتمع في ظرف يجد فيه لبنان نفسه عالقا في حرب لم يخترها بين إسرائيل وحزب الله، طرف لا يعرف أي احترام لقوانين الحرب ويتمادى باعتداءاته على لبنان، وحزب حظر مجلس الوزراء اللبناني نشاطاته العسكرية والأمنية وصنفها بأنها خارجة عن القانون. وها نحن من جديد أمام واقع أليم لا يخدم لبنان ولا اللبنانيين الذين باتوا يواجهون الموت والدمار والتهجير. ليناهز عدد النازحين اللبنانيين مليونا، بعضهم بلا مأوى يليق بالكرامة الإنسانية. ومع كل صباح نصفيق على أعداد جديدة من الضحايا الأبرياء، بينهم نساء وأطفال، وعلى إنذارات بإخلاء مناطق بأكملها ودمار يطال الممتلكات الخاصة والعامة. الأمر الذي يخلق أوضاعا بالغة الصعوبة للحكومة اللبنانية التي تعمل جاهدة لإعادة وضع لبنان على سكة التعافي والإصلاح وبناء المؤسسات. السيد الرئيس، نود أن ننوه إلى أن الحكومة اللبنانية عبرت بوضوح عن رفضها التام وإدانتها لعملية إطلاق الصواريخ التي تبناها حزب الله يوم 2 آذار الجاري، كما أبلغناكم بموجب الرسالة التي وجهناها إليكم في اليوم عينه. وقد أكدت حكومتنا أن هذه العملية تتناقض مع قراراتها بحصر قرار السلم والحرب بالدولة اللبنانية وحدها، ومع مبدأ رفض زج لبنان في الحرب الإقليمية الدائرة، إضافة إلى أن هذه العملية تشكل خروجا على مقررات مجلس الوزراء وتهدف إلى تقويض مصداقية الدولة اللبنانية. سيد الرئيس، لم يشهد تاريخنا الحديث حكومة لبنانية تمتلك هذا القدر من الشجاعة والتصميم على استعادة قرار الدولة وحصر السلاح بالأجهزة الشرعية وحدها، وفرض سيطرة الدولة على كامل أراضيها بقواها الذاتية حصرا، تطبيقا لاتفاق الطائف الذي نص على حل الميليشيات اللبنانية وغير اللبنانية وتسليم أسلحتها إلى الدولة اللبنانية وبسط سلطة الدولة على كامل أراضيها، وللقرارات الدولية ذات الصلة بما فيها القرار 1701، ووفقا لبيانها الوزاري وقراراتها ذات الصلة، لا سيما القرار المتخذ في 5 آب 2025. وللتذكير فإنه في 2 آذار الجاري قررت الحكومة الحظر الفوري لنشاطات حزب الله الأمنية والعسكرية كافة واعتبارها خارجة عن القانون، وإلزامه بتسليم سلاحه إلى الدولة اللبنانية وحصر عمله في المجال السياسي ضمن الأطر الدستورية والقانونية. وبتاريخ لاحق في 5 آذار الجاري اتخذت قراراً إضافياً يقضي بتكليف المؤسسات الأمنية التحقق من وجود عناصر من الحرس الثوري الإيراني في لبنان وترحيلهم فور تحديدهم، كما اتخذت قراراً آخر يقضي بموجب الاستحصال على موافقات مسبقة لإصدار تأشيرات دخول للرعايا الإيرانيين الراغبين بزيارة لبنان. السيد الرئيس، لن نقبل بإعادة استحضار الماضي، فالشعب اللبناني لا يريد الحرب، وحكومة لبنان ماضية في وضع قراراتها موضع التنفيذ ولن تتراجع عنها، لكن تبقى أولويتنا اليوم وقف هذه الحرب وحماية بلدنا وضمان أمن وسلامة شعبنا. فمن حقنا أن نعيش بسلام وأمن في وطننا وضمن محيطنا. ولتحقيق هذه الغاية أعربت الحكومة اللبنانية عن استعدادها الدخول في مفاوضات مع إسرائيل برعاية دولية وبمشاركة مدنيين لتسوية جميع المسائل العالقة. كما دعا فخامة رئيس الجمهورية المجتمع الدولي قبل يومين إلى دعم وتنفيذ المبادرة التي أطلقها، وقوامها التالي إرساء هدنة كاملة مع وقف لكل الاعتداءات الإسرائيلية البرية والبحرية والجوية على لبنان. ثانياً، المسارعة إلى تقديم الدعم اللوجستي الضروري للقوى المسلحة اللبنانية. ثالثاً، قيام القوى المسلحة اللبنانية بالسيطرة على مناطق التوتر ومصادرة كل سلاح فيها، وتسليم سلاح حزب الله ومخازنه ومستودعاته وفق المعلومات والمعطيات الممكن توفرها لها. رابعاً، بشكل متزامن يبدأ لبنان وإسرائيل مفاوضات مباشرة برعاية دولية للتوصل إلى تنفيذ تفاصيل كل ما سبق. السيد الرئيس، مواكبة لجهود الحكومة اللبنانية، فإن هذا المجلس الموقر مدعو إلى التزام إسرائيل بتنفيذ القرار 1701 واحترام وقف الأعمال العدائية والانسحاب الكامل إلى ما وراء الحدود المعترف بها دوليا، ووضع حد لانتهاكاتها وخروقاتها المتكررة للسيادة اللبنانية، والإفراج عن الأسرى اللبنانيين، ووقف تهديداتها لوحدة الأراضي اللبنانية واستقلاله السياسي ضمن حدوده المعترف بها دوليا. ونعيد التأكيد على تمسك لبنان بآليات المتابعة المنشأة بموجب إعلان وقف الأعمال العدائية المنصوص عنها أيضا في قرار مجلس الأمن 2790. ونشدد على أن تمسك لبنان باتفاقية الهدنة مع إسرائيل الموقع بتاريخ 3/3/49 يصب في مصلحة الطرفين. السيد الرئيس، لا يفوتنا أن نجدد إدانتنا للاعتداءات الإيرانية المتعمدة وغير المبررة التي استهدفت دول مجلس التعاون الخليجي والمملكة الأردنية الهاشمية والعراق وسوريا، ونؤكد تضامننا الكامل معها. كما ندين الهجمات التي استهدفت كلا من تركيا وأذربيجان وقبرص، ونجدد شجبنا الشديد لهذه الأعمال التي يرفضها لبنان بصورة لا لبس فيها ودون أي تحفظ. كما ندين الاعتداءات التي تتعرض لها قوات الأمم المتحدة المؤقتة في لبنان من أي جهة أتت، ونعيد التأكيد على امتناننا لهذه القوى وللدول المساهمة فيها ولتضحيات العاملين فيها، لا سيما أولئك الذين قضوا في لبنان خدمة للأمن والسلم الدوليين. وندين بأشد العبارات استهداف مقر الكتيبة الغانية، ونعرب عن تضامننا الكامل مع غانا وقيادة اليونيفيل مع تمنياتنا بالشفاء العاجل للمصابين. أخيرا، سيد الرئيس، يواجه لبنان اليوم لحظة بالغة الخطورة وكارثة إنسانية حقيقية، وبينما نسعى جاهدين إلى التخفيف من معاناة شعبنا وتلبية احتياجاته الإنسانية، فإن أي دعم أو مساعدة للتخفيف من وطأة هذه الأزمة يبقى موضع ترحيب وتقدير. نكرر مرة أخرى بأن لبنان لن يقبل بتحويله إلى ساحة لتصفية الحسابات، وسنواصل السعي لإخراج وطننا من هذه المحنة أكثر قوة ومناعة. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of Lebanon for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I would like to congratulate the United States for taking the presidency for the month of March, and I also would like to thank the briefers. Mr. President, since the 2nd of March, Hezbollah has launched wave after wave of attacks against Israel. More than 880 rockets and missiles, more than 60 UAVs, more than 15 anti-tank guided missiles. Hezbollah itself has been clear about why, and I quote, to avenge the deaths of Ayatollah Khamenei, not to defend Lebanon, not to protect Lebanese citizens, but to serve the agenda of the Iranian regime. Just days ago, they vowed to fight to the last breath. As we sit here today, Israeli families are running to bomb shelters as Hezbollah launches new attacks toward our communities. That is the reality we face. That is why Israel is now operating in Lebanon to stop this threat. Mr. President, to understand where we are today, we must look at what has happened since October 7th. For years, Hezbollah grew into one of the most powerful non-state armed organizations in the world. It began way back in the 80s, when Lebanon was in the middle of a civil war. But over time, it became something more dangerous, a proxy army built by Iran, funded by Iran, trained by Iran, armed by Iran. By 2024, Hezbollah had between 150,000 and 200,000 rockets and missiles. Think about that. The largest arsenal ever held by a non-state actor. Think about your countries. Most of your countries do not have the capacity of 200 missiles and rockets. A war machine built over decades with one purpose: Israel's destruction. After Hamas's October 7th attacks, Hezbollah opened a second front from Lebanon. For months, Israel's northern communities came under fire. Rockets, drones, missiles launched across the border. We responded. Israel responded with targeted operations against Hezbollah's command networks and military infrastructure. I want to remind you that during that operation, senior leadership was eliminated, including their leader, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, a terrorist with blood on his hands. Command structures were disrupted. Around 3,000 fighters from the Radwan force were taken off the battlefield. They lost roughly 80% of its rockets capability. The army Iran spent decades building, we broke it. But Hezbollah was not fully eliminated. We have to admit it. Instead of stepping back after the ceasefire, it rearmed, restocked, it rebuilt, and it did so with the help of the Iranian regime. During the first year after the ceasefire, Iran funneled more than $1 billion to Hezbollah. It continues to receive over $50 million every month to rebuild its military machine. Tehran funds it, Tehran arms it, Tehran directs it. Hezbollah pulls the trigger, but the Ayatollahs in Tehran pull the strings. All of this in direct violation of Security Council Resolution 1701. Mr. President, that resolution required the area between the Blue Line and the Litani River to be free of Hezbollah weapons and terrorists. You all voted on this resolution. I want to show you this map, which shows launch sites used by Hezbollah to fire rockets, missiles, and drones toward Israel. You know, look where they are. All those dots are south of the Litani River. Hezbollah should not be there. And from these locations, on the first day of these attacks, Hezbollah launched missiles toward Israel. You know, one of the villages here, the village of Bargoz, small village. We have the intel about it. When they send a missile from those areas, southern of the Litani, it takes 30 seconds for the missile to land in Israel, in the northern part of Israel. 30 seconds. Imagine for a minute that you are driving with your family in your car and you hear the sirens
and you have 30 seconds. You have to stop the car, you have to look for a shelter, and you have to decide which child you take first to the shelter if you cannot carry all of them. 30 seconds, that's what it takes. Mr. President, since the ceasefire came into effect, Israel has submitted 929 enforcement requests asking the Lebanese armed forces to dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure, launch sites, weapons depots, underground bunkers. However, the efforts of the Lebanese armed forces were not sufficient. Sites that were identified were not dismantled. Sometimes they came there, they took the pictures, and that was it. And today Hezbollah continues to fire rockets at Israel from those same areas. Last August, the Lebanese government instructed its military to prepare a plan to disarm armed militias in the country. We welcomed that decision. It was a momentous step. We also commend the recent statements of Prime Minister Salam declaring Hezbollah's current military activity against Israel illegal. Those are the right words, but the reality on the ground tells a different story. So I ask the Lebanese government, if Hezbollah is being dismantled, where is the evidence? Where are the operations against the launch sites? Where are the seizures of their weapons? Where is your military? Ambassador Arafa, Lebanon now stands at a pivotal moment in its history. The time has come to decide. Will Lebanon stick to declarations or actually act? Because the question before you is very simple. Who controls Lebanon? The Lebanese government or Hezbollah, acting on behalf of the Ayatollahs in Tehran? Lebanon has a national army of more than 72,000 soldiers. Mobilize them, train them, empower them with the authority and resources to assert the sovereignty of the Lebanese state. We support peaceful negotiations. You know that. We spoke before the last operation. But today, as we speak, there are only two options on the table. Either the Lebanese government takes real action to restrain Hezbollah, or Israel will use its strength to dismantle this terrorist organization. There are no other options. You know, we can meet and talk in Akora, wherever you want, but not while Hezbollah is sending missiles into Israel. So Israel is acting. In recent days, the IDF has struck Hezbollah command centers and military infrastructure across southern Lebanon. The IDF has also carried out strikes against assets of Al-Qard al-Qassam network, Hezbollah's financial system used to fund its terrorist activity and rebuild its military capabilities. We have issued evacuation notices to protect Lebanese civilians because we face an enemy that deliberately places them in harm's way. Hezbollah hides behind civilians in Lebanon and firing at civilians in Israel. Mr. President, believe me, Israel does not want to be operating inside Lebanon. But Israel will not accept rockets fired at our people. As we speak, the Iranian regime is losing. And like many failing regimes, it is lashing out at its neighbors across the region, indiscriminately attacking civilians. You will meet at 3 p.m. to discuss that. And its proxy Hezbollah is doing exactly the same to Israel. Many countries in our region have drawn the right conclusion. They are distancing themselves from Tehran, strengthening their defenses, protecting their sovereignty. Lebanon now faces that same choice. Israel will continue confronting the terror network built by Tehran, and we will do whatever is necessary to ensure that rockets and terror can no longer threaten our people. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative for Israel for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا السيد الرئيس. أشكركم على عقد هذا الاجتماع الهام، والشكر موصول للبعثة الدائمة لفرنسا لدعوتها لعقد هذا الاجتماع الطارئ مع عدد من الدول الأخرى، وكذلك أشكر مقدمي الإحاطات. تعرب الجمهورية العربية السورية عن قلقها إزاء التصعيد الخطير الحاصل في المنطقة، والذي كان له ارتدادات كبيرة على كافة الصعد السياسية والأمنية والاقتصادية. ومن جملة هذه الارتدادات ما يتعرض له لبنان الشقيق وشعبه وبنيته التحتية. تؤكد سوريا على دعمها لسلامة لبنان وأمنه، وتستنكر التصعيد والقصف الذي يتعرض له، والذي من شأنه أن يعرقل دور الدولة اللبنانية في تنفيذ مهامها ومسؤولياتها، ومن بينها جهود نزع سلاح حزب الله. كما نحذر من تداعيات النزاع الحاصل حالياً، الذي قد يؤدي استمراره إلى توسيع رقعة الصراع بشكل يتعارض مع مصالح لبنان والمنطقة عموماً، ولا سيما مع تزامن ذلك مع انتهاكات إسرائيل المتكررة للسيادة السورية من خلال الانتهاكات الجوية والتوغل في الأراضي السورية، واحتلال أراضٍ جديدة منذ 8 من كانون الأول ديسمبر 2024 في خرق لاتفاق عام 1974 الذي ثبته مجلس الأمن في قراراته مراراً وتكراراً. ونرحب هنا سيد الرئيس ونشكر جهود الولايات المتحدة بقيادة الرئيس ترامب على دورها في الوساطة لحل هذا الأمر. السيد الرئيس، ترفض سوريا سياسات تهجير المدنيين تحت وطأة القصف والتدمير، لما له من تداعيات إنسانية كبيرة على لبنان وسوريا معا، وسيكون من الصعب احتوائها. وفي سياق متصل ترحب سوريا بقرار الحكومة اللبنانية المتعلق برفض أي أعمال عسكرية أو أمنية تنطلق من الأراضي اللبنانية خارج مؤسسات الدولة الشرعية، وهو ذاته القرار الذي يحظر نشاطات حزب الله الأمنية والعسكرية، ويلزمه بتسليم سلاحه إلى الدولة اللبنانية، بما يكرس حصرية السلاح بيد الدولة ويعزز سيادتها الكاملة على امتداد أراضيها. السيد الرئيس، منذ سقوط النظام البائد وحتى الآن خطت سوريا ولبنان نهجاً جديداً في العلاقات الثنائية، نهجاً يقوم على الاحترام المتبادل والمصالح المشتركة. وقد تجلت هذه العلاقة بإجراء العديد من الزيارات الرسمية المتبادلة لبحث المسائل السياسية والفنية. كما أجرى فخامة الرئيس السوري أحمد الشرع يوم أمس اتصالاً هاتفياً مع فخامة الرئيس اللبناني جوزيف عون، جرى خلاله بحث التطورات الإقليمية الراهنة وتداعياتها على أمن واستقرار المنطقة. وشدد الجانبان على أهمية الحفاظ على أمن وسلامة البلدين. كما أعرب الرئيس الشرع عن دعمه لمساعي الرئيس عون في نزع سلاح حزب الله وتجنيب المنطقة تداعيات الصراع الحالي. وأكد الطرفان على أهمية التنسيق والتعاون بين سوريا ولبنان للحفاظ على أمن البلدين وسلامة شعبيهما، والتصدي لمحاولات زرع الفتنة وزعزعة الاستقرار. وأعرب الرئيس الشرع عن دعم الخطوات الجادة والحاسمة التي تتخذها حكومتي العراق ولبنان لإبعاد الخطر عن بلديهما ومنع أي انزلاق باتجاه الصراع. وانطلاقا من قناعتنا بأن سوريا تتعرض لتداعيات مباشرة وخطيرة نتيجة هذا التصعيد، وبأن استقرار سوريا هو حجر زاوية لاستقرار المشرق العربي والمنطقة، قمنا بتعزيز قواتنا الدفاعية على الحدود مع لبنان والعراق احترازيا لمنع نقل تداعيات هذا النزاع إلى الأراضي السورية، ولمكافحة التنظيمات العابرة للحدود، ومنعها من استخدام الأراضي السورية لتنفيذ أجندات خارجية لا تتناسب مع مصالح الشعب السوري وشعوب الدول المجاورة له. السيد الرئيس، تدين سوريا وبأشد العبارات كافة أشكال الاعتداءات الإيرانية المستمرة التي تطال أمن واستقرار بلدان الخليج العربي والأردن والعراق، وتعرب عن تضامنها الكامل مع تلك الدول الشقيقة التي تتعرض لهذه الاعتداءات الغاشمة على يد إيران، وتدعو إلى احترام سيادتها وسلامة أراضيها. كما تستنكر بلادي جميع التصريحات والإجراءات الإيرانية المتعلقة بإغلاق مضيق هرمز لما تشكله من تهديد لحرية الملاحة والتجارة الدولية، فضلا عن إمدادات الطاقة التي تؤثر على معظم دول العالم. تدعو سوريا إلى خفض التصعيد ودعم المسار الدبلوماسي، على اعتبار أن التصعيد الراهن يمثل تهديدا وجوديا للمنطقة بأسرها، ويهدد الاستقرار الاقتصادي العالمي. وتؤكد سوريا دعمها الكامل والمتواصل لجميع الجهود الرامية لاستقرار المنطقة وتعزيز الحوار والحلول السلمية لحل قضايا المنطقة وضمان الأمن والاستقرار لجميع شعوبها. كما ندعو مجلس الأمن للضغط على إسرائيل لوقفه اعتداءاته على لبنان وشعبه الشقيق، ونعيد التأكيد على وحدة لبنان وسلامة إقليمه، وعلى الدور الهام الذي يطلع به الجيش الوطني اللبناني كضامن لأمن واستقرار لبنان. ونشدد على أهمية الحفاظ على سلامة أفراد قوات اليونيفيل العاملة في لبنان والأوندوف في سوريا، وندد بالاعتداء الذي وقع عليها يوم الجمعة الماضي والذي تسبب بإصابة ثلاثة من أفرادها. ختاما السيد الرئيس، تضامنا مع الأشقاء في دول الخليج العربي والأردن، قامت سوريا برعاية مشروع القرار في مجلس الأمن الذي قدمته مملكة البحرين الشقيقة نيابة عنهم، والذي يدين الاعتداءات الإيرانية غير المبررة عليهم، والذي يطالب بوقفها فورا، وتدعو جميع الدول الأعضاء في مجلسكم الموقر للتصويت لصالحه. شكرا السيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of Syria for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Cyprus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me first to congratulate you for the assumption of the presidency of this council and to thank the briefers for their updates. Madam President, Cyprus is a UN and EU member state most closely connected to the region, and Lebanon is not a distant issue for us. President Christodoulidis, also as Cyprus holds the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union, has been in constant touch with President Aoun as regards the escalating situation. We call on all parties to exercise utmost restraint. Civilians must always be protected, and international humanitarian law must always be respected as well. We condemn the attacks carried out by Hezbollah against Israel following the former's decision to align with the Iranian attacks. At the same time, while Israel has the right to self-defense in line with international law, we are concerned about the intensification of military operations which have caused mass displacement. Cyprus is steadfast in its support for Lebanon's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. We therefore welcome the recent decision of the Lebanese government to prohibit military and security activities and to disarm Hezbollah. We also welcome the public statements of the Lebanese Foreign Minister Raghi, who conveyed his strong condemnation of the reported drone attacks that may have originated from Lebanese territory towards the island of Cyprus. Strengthening state authority across the entire territory of Lebanon is essential. The monopoly on legitimate force must rest solely with the Lebanese armed forces. Cyprus has long supported the Lebanese armed forces and will continue to do so as a strategic priority. We will continue providing training and financial assistance, including through our participation in the Military Technical Committee for Lebanon. The full implementation of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701 remains essential for restoring stability along the Blue Line. Cyprus condemns the attacks against UNIFIL and reiterates its strong support to the force and its mandate. Allow me also to express our solidarity with the Ghanaian government whose contingent was attacked. UNIFIL peacekeepers' safety and security must be ensured at all times. Diplomacy remains the best path forward to lasting de-escalation. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Cyprus for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers, and the meeting is adjourned.